are back inside City Hall. Last Friday, political operative John Haggerty was found guilty of stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars from Mayor Bloomberg. The conviction gave Manhattan District Attorney Cyrus Vance a much-needed win, but some critics have questioned whether the case should have been brought to trial in the first place. Here to discuss that topic and more are the four members of our Consultants Corner. We've got Republicans Jake Menges and Bill O'Reilly, and Democrats Williams and George Arzt. Welcome to all of you. I know this is a tough question in part because he's a part of your fraternity, and some of you have even worked on races with John Haggerty. Just as a professional, as a colleague, what's it mean for him to be convicted like this?
I think we first have to see what happens with the appeal. I mean, John is planning to issue an appeal, but it is an awkward situation because I've known John and his family for years. I consider John a friend. I've also been a supporter of Mayor Bloomberg, so it's an unfortunate situation, and I think until the appeal's done, we have to withhold some judgment. But I think what this case does, to bring a little bit of a helicopter ride on it, is it shines light on the whole campaign finance system, the labyrinth of laws that are around money and campaigns, and maybe this is an opportunity to look at that, because almost all campaigns violate the spirit of the law the moment they begin, because everybody's looking for the shortcut around the money. And it's a very complicated system, and things like this happen as a result, and it's an unfortunate circumstance.
Yeah, I like John, and John is a very effective operative and strategist. He's done a phenomenal job on lots of Republican campaigns throughout the state. And you know, I think it's interesting. I think he did what Mike Bloomberg hired him to do. So I didn't hear Bloomberg yelling for a refund or his money back. I think there was a lot of money that was spent on that campaign, to a lot of big payouts to a lot of members of the Bloomberg staff, including $450,000 that went to the Independence Party. And I'm not quite sure why John was the only person that was targeted, and not some of these other entities involved in this race. But
to take $700,000 for a house is a real violation of the spirit or anything else of the law. And I believe that more scrutiny needs to come to all funds that go into campaigns. And I think it's better, and people have lost confidence in politics. And one of the reasons why people are so skeptical is campaign finance.
But I think one of the reasons is that campaigns all have housekeeping accounts where huge sums of dollars go into places where they're really unaccounted for. It happens in all campaigns. And you know, the spotlight just happened to focus on this one and on John Haggerty in this case, but this happens all the time. This happens up and
Joy,
down.
you were working for the other side in the election in question.
And I would have to question that. I mean, we didn't obviously have, you know, millions of dollars to spend on the campaign. All the money that we used was accounted for. We were able to use the money to bring out votes or to do voter registration, whatever we did them for. So there are plenty of campaigns and plenty of candidates who are not looking for a way around the campaign finance law, but are just using the money that we raised the money for, which is to elect a candidate. And so I don't know the consultant, you know, directly. I didn't work with him, obviously being on the opposite side, but I can say that definitely using money to buy a house is not part of running a campaign, unless the house is being used as a campaign location, which even then is still buying a house is not the same. What I find interesting about this case in general is that from the public perspective, not being in the courtroom and sort of not seeing how the case was actually presented, is this was more of a case about Mayor Bloomberg and sort of how how he operates in terms of run of a campaign. I didn't get the sense that more of this was about conveying to the public, you know, what the violation or what the crime was. This was more about Mayor Bloomberg.
Very interesting. I mean, one of the points of a public trial, in fact, is to educate the public about what the law is and when the law is broken.
That's
and
right.
it was kind of hard to follow that thread from start to finish, I have to say, in this case. Let's talk about one of the other political parts of this case, which is the prosecutor. Cyrus Vance was under a lot of pressure. He had other cases that didn't go his way or appeared to have left him looking like less than a perfect prosecutor. We asked you to grade his performance in this case, and we'll start with you, Jake.
I gave him a C. I thought he's guilty of selective prosecution. I think John Haggerty was the target, and I think this case ended up with more questions than answers at the end, and I think we'll have to see what happens through the appeal process.
Joy Williams.
I gave him a B. I mean, ultimately, he presented a case and you want a conviction, right? And that's what he got. And even though there's going to be an appeal, and I think you're right, there are more people in this. If you're going to go after the public's trust in terms of campaign finance, there are other people that got large sums of money that we need to determine what was that money used for, who else needs to be prosecuted. It remains to be seen if the district attorney's office plans to go forward with any of those other ones, but so far we haven't seen that. So I give him a B. He got the conviction that he was seeking. However, like I said, majority of this was about Mayor Bloomberg, and he didn't convey to the public that, you know, there was some wrong that the public should feel from this case.
Bill.
I gave him a C as well, and I agree completely with Jake that there were more questions coming out of this trial than going in. So at least in the court of public opinion, I give him a C. We'll see what happens with the appeal. But again, I have to make the case that when you try and regulate speech with campaign finance laws, you end up with loopholes like this. This was a very dramatic example, but you end up with loopholes. All campaigns have some loopholes where you can give $1,200 to a candidate, but you can give $12 million to the political party. When you start to create these different paths, this is what can happen, and it did. But for Mr. Vance, I give him a C on it.
Okay, and George, in fair disclosure, you are an advisor to District Attorney Vance.
I have been an advisor.
Your
yes.
grade for your client.
I gave him an A because he got a conviction.
Very objective.
And listen to your advice.
What? He got a conviction, and he prevented the case from being a referendum on Bloomberg, which is what the Haggerty lawyers did. Also, the whole idea of people saying that, you know, it shouldn't have just been him, it should have been other people. When the music stops in your court, that's the ballgame. It happens in every case. You know, that's the way life works. And Haggerty was there when the music stopped.
Very interesting, and I think you're right about that. That's something you hear in every case. It's like, hey, what about everybody else?
That's right.
Right. Let's talk about the police commissioner. We have seen a number of what can only be called scandals and burgeoning scandals emerging. This ticket fixing thing, which seems to lead to all kinds of other sort of stories. You've got a federal indictment of a cop who apparently, on top of everything else, was using racial epithets in the course of framing people and gleefully admitting that he had done so. And still there's talk about Ray Kelly as a candidate for mayor. What do you guys hear? What do you make of all of this?
I find this particularly interesting that the police commissioner can have great PR and sort of a strong numbers, and yet the department still have a view of this rampant corruption, police officers using excessive force. We've seen that on Occupy Wall Street. We saw that a couple of months ago back in September when the councilman and another government aide was arrested. I have no doubt that majority of police officers wake up every day and they go and do their job. They're not racially profiling and things of that nature. But you can't disregard all of these instances that are happening in the police department, and the commissioner doesn't seem to have a forceful hand in saying this will not happen, you know, under my administration. And so I find this particularly interesting, you know, that the commission, that he can be removed from these attacks that NYPD is taking.
It's called Teflon, right? Some people got it, some people don't.
I think Kelly's been a good commissioner. And I don't think corruption is rampant, despite the ticket fixing scandal. I do think that Kelly's done a good job, and he's led the department well, and he's got a sterling resume. If he were to become a candidate, I think he would be formidable, especially if he ran on the Republican line.
I think the police department has shown extraordinary restraint with the Occupy Wall Street protesters. I mean, you have a lot of young officers that are the same age as these protesters. They're all working very hard. They're out there working. They get tired. They have batons and guns. It's been extraordinary restraint. I think they've done a wonderful job. I think Commissioner Kelly would be an instant front runner for mayor. He's been in the public life in New York for 25 years, and he still is extraordinarily popular. That's hard to do. I mean, he's really been a public servant on both sides. He's served Democrats and Republicans and independents. He's a real force, and if he wants to run, he'll be considerable.
Yeah, and I agree with Bill. I think the police force has done a fantastic job, showing a lot of restraint down there. with a crowd that has been very disrespectful and rude to the police force. I've gone down and watched some of this stuff. I think it's absolutely outrageous that the mayor has tied the police commissioner's hands on this. These people should not be able to camp out there. They have every right to voice their opinion and protest. They don't have a right to camp out there. If you wanted to have 25 people move into your apartment, the city would serve you with a summons. These people don't have the right to sleep there.
But how do you explain the excessive force that we see on video of officers using pepper spray, of officers using potato?
Well, that's what you see. One account.
That is one account, but there's still those accounts, and there's no forceful downgrading of them being able to do that.
In the one instance that the pepper spray, that's got to be dealt with. That's got to be dealt with by the law. I agree.
And not just loss.
Right, but the fact that it's been limited
time.
to an incident with going on a month and change of demonstrations. I think it's a pretty good record.
Well,
for the
a couple of incidents.
It's there was
a guy who got punched in the face on a different date. That was.
It's private property. They don't have a right to behave the way they've been behaving. We're in very tough financial times in the city. This is costing us a lot of money, and I think the mayor is wrong for not trying to move these people out.
I don't think that anyone wants a confrontation down there. It isn't worth it. People remember, people of my age anyway, remember Chicago of 1968.
But hang on a second.
And the people just don't want
40% of the revenues of this city come in from Wall Street, and these people are out there. It would be as if the group was going in the 70s into Pittsburgh and
they have a right to protest.
They have a right to protest. They don't have a right to sleep down there, and they don't have the right to clog up the city business. And that's what they're doing. They don't have a right to force all of us to have to pay $2 million plus in overtime.
They should work with the community, but they have a right to protest.
They have a right to protest. They don't have a right to sleep there.
That is part
of the protest. They do not have a right to
sleep.
sleep there. They have a right to protest, and that's the difference.
We are going to leave it right there. Thank you all so much for joining us. We look forward to talking with you again real soon. We're going to take a break now. Then I'm going to be back with some viewer mail and a preview of tomorrow night's program. Stay with us.